Hi, it's Dana, and I'm here with your divination for the new moon in Sidereal Libra. The 2025 Sidereal Astrology Guide says strategically planting seeds for a new consensus. Break down. If you can't hold it, let it hold you. Let it carry you. When you've done all that you know. Hold your horses, strap in, buckle up, get your wig on straight because it's showtime. And by showtime, I mean that the astrology that we are embarking upon at this new moon, the astrology that is going to carry us through the end of 2025 through, let's just say indefinitely. Maybe we'll get a break sometime in May next year. I don't know. Don't count on it. But it's starting now at this new moon. We are just on the heels of a conjunction between Mercury and Mars in sidereal Libra, same sign as this new moon. And that happened. And then Amazon Cloud Services crashed, which is basically the place where everything on the internet is stored because Amazon has a monopoly on society. And so when Amazon Cloud Services crashed, a lot of things went down. A lot of things stopped working. And this is how we're starting Mercury retrograde. Now, if you have been following my work for a while, then you already know the deal. But if you're new here, I'll explain it to you. Often, when people are talking about Mercury retrograde, they focus on the degrees, which are important, don't get me wrong. But in my observation, Mercury retrograde is a season of time. It is not just this period that is bookended by Mercury doing things at specific degrees. In my experience and observation, the Mercury retrograde window opens as soon as Mercury enters the sign where it will later station direct. This particular Mercury retrograde is in both sidereal Libra and Scorpio, which means that when Mercury crossed over into sidereal Libra, that's when this Mercury retrograde window opened. That was October 2nd. And since then, the government has shut down. We've got Amazon Cloud Services going down. We've got air traffic controllers, TSA, flights all in danger because of this government shutdown because people are not getting paid. And so there is a lot at stake. Mercury actually officially crosses over into its shadow, meaning it will cross over the degree where it will later station direct tomorrow. So today's October 20th, tomorrow's October 21st. Mercury officially crosses over into that retrograde territory. And it's a new moon. So the stakes are getting really high. And obviously, there's been a lot of talk about this. But I want to inject a bit of optimism and hope. We had the No Kings protest here in America over the weekend, which I believe can be aligned with the Mercury Mars conjunction in sidereal Libra that um, we just wrapped up, as well as this new moon. And while my personal opinion and personal politics is kind of tired of protest, one of the really fascinating things that I observed or saw around this protest is that Mayor Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, Illinois, where Trump currently has ICE officers terrorizing the city, disrupting the economy, harming citizens, harming members of the community, locking folks up, trying to ship folks off to the prisons where his buddy is making all of the money for holding these folks. um, Mayor Brandon Johnson made a speech at No King's Day in Chicago and called for a general strike. Those of us who are part of the online leftist community, those of us who are a part of the offline leftist community, have been talking about a general strike for a long time. I'm talking years, understanding that this is the thing that needs to happen because a general strike will disrupt the movement of capital in a way where the corporations are going to want for things to be addressed. Everybody's money gets messed up when there is a general strike. Our labor is the engine of this whole machine. And when I say machine, I say our labor is the engine of capitalism. Our labor is the engine of white supremacy. Our labor is the engine of racism. And when we revoke our labor, the machine stops. And I've talked a lot about how the way that these structures work, our labor is what stands between us and the material things we need to survive. Meaning that if you don't work, you are in danger of losing whatever material stability and security that you have. We are wage slaves, meaning that we don't have a choice but to work because everything costs, right? I touched on this capitalism thing, abundance, in episode 10 of the Divination for Liberation podcast. And I think that you should go listen to it, slash watch it, slash read it. But in any case, this idea of a general strike is a coordinated effort amongst all unions, all industries to not only not work, but to use mutual aid and other funds that we prepare in advance to cover the expenses of those who cannot afford to not work, right? That's how that works. Strategically planting seeds for a new consensus. Let's talk about this real quick. This is a new moon in sidereal Libra, and the gift of sidereal Libra in Divination for Liberation sidereal astrology is strategic. Strategic means to respond and not react. Strategic means to think before you act. It means to make an attempt to foresee the consequences of any action, behavior, movement, or even facial, right? Even the face you make. That strategy is about configuring our actions so that they align with a longer term goal rather than reacting. So, for example, rather than getting angry and cussing somebody out, being strategic is like, oh, I got you. Yeah, yeah, okay. It is to hold in your memory the way that somebody's behavior or action makes you feel and not reacting in that moment, but maybe later planning, right? When we talk about people who are experience domestic violence, often they need to employ strategy in order to get away because the data and the facts show that particularly women who are victims of domestic violence at the hands of their male partners, they are more likely to be killed when they leave. So leaving has to be strategic. Strategy is about not reacting. It's about acknowledging the fact that something is going down and making a plan to execute in a very specific way over a very specific period of time in order to reach a goal. Another way that I like to talk about Libra is how do I get you to respond to me the way that I want you to, right? There is force, brute force, right? I can, slap you across your face. I can spit on you. I can lock you up and force you to do labor, right? Physically, but Libra is strategic, and that strategy is often using coercion. So I want you to understand the wound of Libra, coercion, in a neutral way. Yes, coercion is violence. Yes, is threats of punishment. Yes, coercion is manipulation. But coercion is also, no, you don't get my vote unless you XYZ. No, you don't get my money unless you XYZ. We have all been on the receiving end of coercion because we are coerced to work. Because if we don't work, there are consequences. So we are in this social dynamic of how do I get you to respond to me the way that I want you to? How do I get you to do what I want you to do in these mutual ways? But at this moment, under this particular sky, strategically planting seeds for a new consensus, my optimism, my hope is one that this really is a moment where, like, okay, this general strike might really be a thing. It might really be a thing. The language is out there. The discussions are happening. It's outside the bubble of the leftist community, which is aware of these concepts and the need for it, right? But the other piece is like a new consensus is really that we agree to think about, talk about, and act in a certain way. A consensus is really about there are some things that are not going to change unless we do it together. That's my definition of liberation. Liberation is when we collectively get free. I can have my individual freedoms. I can make a little bit more money. I can get secure housing. I can get more freedom of movement, etc. I could get a better job. And that's great. But that is inherently insecure when it is not a collective and communal condition. Everybody needs to have security in order for my stability to actually be stable. Otherwise, it's feeble, right? Because the conditions that create my freedom are creating somebody else's oppression. The conditions that create my choice are creating somebody else's lack of choice. The conditions that are creating my wealth are creating somebody else's poverty. And so I'm just trying to push the poverty away from me rather than eradicate the poverty and the conditions that create the poverty. We have a new moon in Libra at every year, right? Once a year, we get a new moon in Libra around this time. And depending on what the larger context of the sky looks like, we are always planting seeds for a new consensus. But this particular sky is different. It's correlating with, or it's coinciding with this Mercury Mars conjunction in Libra. There will be a couple more conjunctions before this Mercury retrograde season is over between those two planets. We also have the Mercury retrograde in Libra. Mercury is going to station retrograde November 9th, redrawing emotional boundaries. That is in Scorpio. And Mercury is going to station direct on November 29th. The fill in the blank for Mercury's direct station on November 29th is concealing emotional vulnerability. I'm looking in the guide and there's a mistake there, but that's what it's supposed to say. I had to go to my Word document to see what I actually wrote for that. Concealing emotional vulnerability. This really hits home to what Libra really is about. It's about composure. It is about concealment. Concealment is a necessary part of any strategy when we're talking about the signs that Venus rules, that's Taurus and Libra, we're talking about what something looks like. And what something looks like is just as important as what something does, if not more important, in a society where we prioritize the sense of sight over all else. It's very easy to deceive people if you just make something look like something else, right? Strategically planting seeds for a new consensus, I think, also has the potential to reorganize political alliances. And I understand that, you know, it is beneficial to align yourself with a certain group or politic at any given time, depending on which way the money is flowing. And obviously, that's a huge issue in American politics because of Citizens United, which was a decision that came down in January of 2010, I believe, that basically said corporations are people and they have a right to free speech, which includes spending money on campaigns, paying politicians, etc. And actually, in Montana, they have some policy switch ups that are challenging. the concept of corporations having a voice, having a right to free speech in the form of spending money on campaigns. I'll put a link to that news story in the description. I don't want to misrepresent the details because I'm not fully clear on them in this moment. But I'll drop that link in the description. I think that's also part of strategically planting seeds for a new consensus. Another way that we're seeing this strategically planting seeds for a new consensus, there is a public health alliance between some of the blue states, which include Illinois, California, and some of the Northeast states, that has formed in reaction and response to the CDC's recent spate of nonsense around vaccines. So again, strategically planting seeds for a new consensus. That means alliances. That means negotiations. That means litigation. We've got the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago suing the Trump administration. We've got the governor of Illinois calling for the arrest of federal officials. And I'm going to have to actually find a link on that because that's me quoting somebody that I heard on TikTok and I did not read the story for myself. So if that is in fact true, I will drop the link to that story in the description in the show notes as well. I think that this new moon contains seeds that are going to be playing out through the end of this decade. And this is for a couple reasons. One, next year in 2026, there will be important activity in the sign of Libra. Venus will retrograde majority of the time in Libra. Mercury will also retrograde completely in Libra. That's in 2026. Later on in 2028, 2029, Saturn is going to be in Aries, but Jupiter is going to be in Libra. So we had a conjunction, the great conjunction in 2020 between Jupiter and Saturn. This is every 20 years they conjoin, right? So we had that conjunction. 2024 and 2025, we've been at the square. So in 2024, the square was between Saturn in Aquarius and Jupiter in Taurus. 2025, the square was between Saturn in Pisces and Jupiter in Gemini. This has been the reelection of Donald Trump as the 47th president of the United States. But I think the seed of that conjunction back in 2020 was really about the economy. That conjunction was COVID. That conjunction was so many of the policies we have been told were socialist being implemented. That meant health insurance subsidies that expanded access to Medicaid. That meant increased unemployment benefits. That meant eviction moratoriums. A lot of tenants unions formed on the other side of that, and there have been some wins. Again, I'll try to link some in the show notes. That was also the government sending people money, the seeds of universal basic income. And in fact, since then, there have been some pilots of basic income or universal basic income in a few states. Again, I'll drop that in the show notes as a consequence of 2020. We've also got a Democratic Socialist running for mayor of New York City. And that's a big deal. That all has seeds in that conjunction in 2020 for me. And we're seeing it ripen at this square phase, which we are exiting and transitioning out of right now. When we get to 2028, 2029, I'm not sure on the exact year, we will be at the opposition between Saturn in Aries and Jupiter in Libra. So you can think of that as like akin to a full moon between Saturn and Jupiter. And full moons are culminations. Uh, we think of the word consensus when it comes to Libra. Consensus is always going to be courts, litigation, and legislation and voting, right? So again, it's not lost on me that next year, when we have Mercury and Venus retrograde in Libra, it'll be the midterm 2026 elections. We're not going to talk about that now because it's kind of a mess what's going on then, but I don't know if you have the 2026 guide, you can jump ahead and read some of the fill in the blanks and interpretations of those transits that I've written about and kind of connect the dots and let it swirl around in your head to see what you come up with. I have thoughts that I'll share about that later that specifically have to do with how we vote. Okay. So this new moon is not something small. I think of activity in a sign as an ongoing story, an ongoing plot. So we have something in Libra now, right? But we'll have something in Libra next year. We'll have something in Libra later at the end of this decade. And these stories are all connected. If we go backwards, the last time Jupiter was in Libra was in 2017, 2018. If I'm not mistaken, yes, 2017, 2018. And we had a Venus retrograde in Libra in 2018. That was me too, right? That was women being elected into public office across the globe in numbers that we hadn't seen before, right? So the consensus around women's access to power shifted. Strategically planting seeds for a new consensus means we are planting seeds that have a long life for a new consensus around a lot of different things. But I think particularly politically and economically, who has a right to power? What do they have the right to do with that power? And how do we use our collective power to shift the consensus around those topics? When we are looking at our personal birth charts, we're looking at where Libra fits into our birth charts. We're considering how these Libra transits impact us personally. We are talking about our own capacity to act strategically. When we're talking about Venus ruled signs like Libra, the goal is always to navigate the connection, to navigate the relationship, to preserve the relationship as something meaningful and useful. We're talking about collective social contracts and how those social contracts impact our personal relationships and our personal lives. We're talking about collective negotiations around how we collectively relate to certain things and each other, and again, how that distills down. As an air sign, Libra is always saying, how will this look to other people? In order to act strategically, you cannot only center your own desire. You cannot only center your own will, your own impulse, your own thoughts or ideas. At the end of the day, you got to deal with other people, right? And Libra says, hey, if you want control, if you want to get to where you're going, you need to consider how are other people going to react to this? And in light of that foresight of how other people are going to react, how does that inform the way that you move? How does that inform your choices in action? Aries would say, I'm doing this because I can. I'm doing this because I want to. Aries says the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Libra says the shortest distance between 2 points is making sure the person that stands at the door to let you in will open it for you when you get there, right? Aries is just like, oh, I'm just going to run through it. I'll just bulldoze. I'll just put my head down. I'll force it. I'll make them open the door for me. And Libra is like, nah, but if you smile, they might open the door for you. If you look pretty, they might open the door for you. If you don't make them angry, they might open the door for you, right? And so the Democrats right now are playing strategy, right? Oh, okay. Let's see what you're going to do. You going to shut the government down? Cool. You going to raise those subsidies? All right. Let's see what the consequences of that are. Now, I don't have any optimism about the Democratic Party. They are a bunch of corporate stooges who love that APAC money too much to actually do anything that makes any sense. But the minute their money gets funny, they will do what whoever has the money tells them to, which is why I think a general strike is really important. Anyways, applying this to our personal lives, what is the role and function of strategy playing for you in this moment? What is the role and function of negotiation and agreement? How are you learning to be more strategic in order to reach your goals and get to where you want to go? Whose cooperation do you need in this moment in order to realize some of your goals? Holds the wisdom that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think even more importantly, just because you can doesn't mean you will. Just because you have the ability does not mean you have the opportunity. And if you think that lack of opportunity is a statement about your ability, Libra is like, no, that's not how that works. We are a social species. And opportunity comes from getting somebody to open that door for you. It comes from collaboration and cooperation. Venus ruled signs, Libra, they teach us to magnify the commonalities and minimize the differences. It's saying, hey, don't be on that Virgo stuff of trying to be meticulous and point out all the minute distinctions between how we want to approach and do this thing, whether that's in our relationships personally, in our political alliances, in this moment of the possibility of a general strike. What is the commonality between us that we can share resources, we can share skills and abilities in order to get towards? Often, when we're dealing with Libra, we're dealing with litigation. We're dealing with having to go to court. We're dealing with needing to, have mediation. Mediation is about finding the middle way between two disparate people's wills. These are words that are important for us right now, individually and collectively. And I'm hoping that you're able to apply this to your own life at the moment of this new moon. Let's pull some cards. Hey, are you enjoying the Divination for Liberation podcast? If so, I would love for you to consider supporting the production and creation of this podcast with a monthly monetary blessing by joining the Divination for Liberation Podia. There, you will find all types of bonus content like horoscopes, recordings of past workshops, and study salons, depending on what tier you subscribe at. Every month, I host an astrology meetup going through the annual astrology guide, contextualizing it into the big picture of the astrology of the year, and answering your questions about how it relates to you. Join for as little as $6 a month, and you will have access to that monthly astrology meetup, the recordings that I offer, as well as bonus content from this podcast. You will be making sure that this content that you love is continuing to be produced and provided to you like your regularly scheduled program. Thank you to everybody who already is subscribed, and I look forward to inviting more of you into the Divination for Liberation community. All right, we've got the Ace of Wands on the bottom, which I think is very appropriate. The Ace of Wands is to me like the key in the ignition. The car is like getting started up and revving to go. It's an energy of readiness. It is an energy of eagerness. It is like a kind of an energy that you have to tap into and take advantage of because it's not something that can be sustained long term. When you start the car and it's like right, it's making that noise. That's all the sparks and combustion happening in order to get that engine started. That is not the thing that's going to keep the car going, but it is the thing that's going to get the car started and to get it in the position to move. So I mean, I think that's so straightforward, but I will ask you, for your own personal life, what do you feel is this ripeness, this readiness? The key is in the ignition. What are you feeling like? Ooh, yeah, let's do it. This is the moment to do it. What are you feeling like you have a readiness of fuel, creating an eagerness for you to move in a particular direction? We've got death and we've got the Knight of Wands. Now, that is a fascinating combination. And y'all probably don't know what that means, but it's fascinating to me. To go from the Ace of Wands to death is like, wait, I thought we were starting something. I thought we were, yes, yes, we're starting the ending. We're starting the ending of something. I think what's so fascinating about new moons is that it's dark. Like it's called new, and we take that to mean like, yes, let's get this thing going. But it's that, but also it's dark. Like at a new moon, you literally cannot see the light of the moon, which is how we perceive the light of the sun, right? That's what illuminates the face of the moon, the light of the sun, right? I think that there are always endings as well as beginnings wrapped up in new moons. And this combination of cards is illustrating that in a really important way. And just like the astrology of that is that in order to get to a new moon, it means that what that looks like in a chart is a conjunction. A conjunction is when two bodies or points, they arrive at the same sign and degree of the zodiac at the same time. And what happens in that conjunction is that the previous cycle is ending, right? So the lead up to that conjunction is where all of the juice is, but the lead up to that conjunction is also the energy of an ending. It's wrapping something up in order to start something new. It's like hoeing and tilling the soil to turn it over, to get the worms moving, to get some fresh air in there, to add some fertilizer to make it fertile for this next leg of the journey or this next growing season. We are starting a new season of a new consensus, which means that old consensuses have to die. That means old pacts and agreements become irrelevant. That means old rules and ways of navigating things no longer work. The death card is irrevocable in that it brings change that is not reversible. And this is uncomfortable because often it is difficult to let go of the familiar when what we have to grasp onto is unfamiliar, but also when there's actually nothing there to grasp onto. I think this is the nature of change in our personal lives. This is the nature of change collectively, that we have to let go of certain agreements that we might be the only people actually holding up at this point, the only side holding up at this point. And we have to open our hands and use our imaginations to create something new. It would be great if we could let go of the old and the new was already fully formed and we just have to learn the new norms and rules. But this is kind of a create as you go type of situation. This isn't a situation where you let go of the old and everything there is all set up for you, like going from eighth grade to high school. You leave middle school and some of those relationships and teachers and rules, and then you go to high school, and all you have to do is just learn the new rules and do your best to follow them. Nope. That's not what's happening here. We are making the rules as we go. This is a real death, a real sense of loss. And piggybacking on episode 10, where the Five of Cups came up, and we were talking about the grief that comes up when you acknowledge contradictions, because it means that you might have to reorganize and disrupt your entire life. You might lose relationships, family, community, jobs, belief systems, just because you acknowledge that the contradictions have become too unbearable to sustain. So there's an interesting continuity between that and where we are now with the death card here. It's saying, hey, this is inevitable. This is irrevocable. You cannot go back. Let this be a moment where we Knight of Wands instead. The Knight of Wands is emerging from that sense of loss, that ending, that feeling of loss of control, and really taking advantage of an opportunity. That's how I see the Knight of Wands. The Knight of Wands takes advantage of opportunities. It strikes while the iron is hot. It sees that gate left open, looks around to make sure nobody's coming, and runs for freedom, right? When we are stuck in old pacts and agreements, when we are stuck in old rules, when we are stuck in old social contracts, we see that opportunity and we wonder if anybody else is seeing it. We wonder if this is the time to go. We look to our left and we look to our right to see if we are all going to go together. But that can't be the way that we move in this next phase of our collective political moment. And that cannot be the way that you move in this next area of your life. Some of the collaborations and connections that you need to go on this next leg of your life are only going to be met when you start running first. We're going to dive deeper into this energy and this concept of setting the pace on the next episode of the Divination of Liberation podcast, which will be the full moon in sidereal Aries. But this moment, I think, is really about recognizing that the social contracts we've been operating under are completely gone, and that as we continue to reconcile contradictions, the truth we arrive at is that we need a new consensus. And a new consensus doesn't come because everybody agrees that we need a new consensus first. In your life, those of you who have gone no contact with your parents, you didn't come to an agreement to go no contact with your parents first. It's just something that you did, and that's the new consensus. Yes, you probably acted unilaterally in your own best interest, but you decided to pull out from the social contract that this is the way we're going to relate to each other. This is the way we're going to treat each other. This is the way we're going to talk each other. One person can step outside of the contract and change it. One person can decide to get off script and shift the plot of the whole movie. Where are you going to get off script? Where are you shifting the plot? Where are you seeing that the contracts, pacts, and agreements in your life are no longer right for you? This is an ending that is also full of opportunity for newness. I think that the wands in this set of cards offers us a fresh energy around something that can feel really, really, really heavy. And, as someone who talks about politics a lot online and gets a lot of engagement, one of the things that I observe is that people's rebuttals are because they want to hold on to the old social contract and they are avoiding the emotion of grief. They are avoiding the emotion of rage. They are avoiding conflict. That's the thing about Libra. People think Libra is about just wanting everything to be in balance. That is not Libra. Libra recognizes that there's conflict, okay? It's just that the way that Libra deals with the conflict is strategically rather than reactively. What in your life can use some strategic energy? Sometimes this just means that you are no longer in a reactive space around your own triggers. You are able to use the air of this Libra moment to get some distance and perspective so you can see clearly. Now, there's nothing in these cards that's about thinking. And maybe that's because Mars is really featuring at this new moon, which it's with its conjunction to Mercury, as well as it's going to be moving to Scorpio while we're still kind of in the new moon phase. The Knight of Wands is harnessing this martial energy and saying, hey, there are maybe some people who are already going where you want to go, but you cannot see. You cannot recognize and even see the people who are going in the same direction as you until you already make that move. This is not a wait and see moment. This is like, just go for it. Just go for it. Just make it happen. Right? Just do it. And the collaboration and cooperation you're seeking is already in progress in some capacity. There are already people going there, but it requires a shift for you. So maybe you're not changing the contracts and agreements of existing relationships in the sense of sustaining them or maintaining them. You are establishing new relationships with new contracts and new agreements. And when I use that word, please don't only think of that literally like a piece of paper that you're writing and signing. Contracts are implicit. Contracts are implicit in the sense that patterns of how we relate to each other become an unspoken set of rules that we lean on. Contracts become explicit because we are trapped in dynamics of coercion and compliance. Where are you trapped in dynamics of coercion and compliance in your life? Where do you fear punishment and rejection in a way that leads you to compliance, that leads you to I often think of this as like sometimes doing the labor of complying. And that really looks like somebody's not going to come out and directly say to you that they're punishing you, or they're not going to come out and directly threaten you with punishment, but you are wise enough to pick up what they're putting down. And so you comply in advance. You can choose not to uphold your end of the contract. You can choose to no longer participate in the implied consensus. You can disagree. You can plant seeds for a new consensus. Thank you for joining me in this episode of the Divination for Liberation podcast. I will see you in a couple of weeks at the full moon in sidereal Aries, which will be very, very, very spicy. Kind of looking forward to it because I feel like we need a little bit of that energy to shake things up. In the meantime, in between time, continue to monitor your health and wellness while we continue to recede in this current COVID surge. We don't even really have access to wastewater data because the government shutdown is no longer reporting wastewater data. This is where Divination for Liberation has to live up to its name because the divination is all we got. So, in my estimation, the next COVID surge will peak mid January, which means it will start to ramp up around December. However, as this current COVID surge is receding, the viruses that cause colds are running rampant. This was some wastewater data that came out just prior to the government shutdown. And I've also seen some healthcare professionals talking about the number of positive, enterovirus, adenovirus, all of those viruses that cause colds. So wash your hands, mask in indoor spaces, mind the ventilation, stay home. If you are sick, we have to take care of us. Let this also be a part of the new consensus we are strategically planting seeds for. Bye.